Welcome to the Andrew Holland Podcast, where we explore the stories of successful people, get insight and advice from individuals who have accomplished amazing things, and dive deep into understanding ourselves as human beings. Now, here's your host, Andrew Holland.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Andrew Holland Podcast. Joining us today, we have founder and managing partner of Kaiser Commercial Real Estate, Jonathan Kaiser. Jonathan?
What's a founding founder? Is that like two levels ahead?
That's above.
Wow.
That means like
I'm a founding founder.
You
I
founded
love
a company and then you found another one and you're like way at the top of the
Man.
food chain.
Man, thanks for having me.
So much to talk about. And
A lot going on in the world.
I have a million questions for you. We come into the real estate world at a very interesting time.
Yep.
Rates have gone up tremendously,
Yep.
almost 5.25% over the last 18 to 22 months. All the talk about commercial real estate and what's happening. Is it
Yep.
going to go even lower? Want to talk about all that. But
Sure.
first, I don't think you can really understand someone until you understand their background and where they came from. So tell us,
Sure.
where were you born and raised? Tell us how you got into commercial real estate. You have an exciting story. I didn't mention that he's also the author of You Don't Have to Be Ruthless to Win. Fantastic book. I'll put a link to it in my show notes so that you can all buy it. Support Jonathan. You'll be supporting the podcast at the same time. I want to talk a lot about that because your philosophy of why you went on your own and what you saw when you were first in the commercial real estate just really resonated. So give us some background.
Sure. Well, first I want to commend you on your amazing studio that you've built here. As someone who does a lot of podcasts, you've done a great job. So it's exciting to be in here.
Thank you.
So I had a kind of unique background. I was raised a Christian missionary kid in Papua New Guinea, and most people couldn't say that without a smile on their face. And I was raised by parents that taught me to love, serve, give, and help. And I thought that was the way that everybody operated until I got back from overseas and I realized, wow, we're poor. Everybody else seems to have more than we do. And we all spend all of our time trying to help as many people as possible. What about us? And so I developed at a young age. I said, I want to be rich. I don't even know what that means, but I want the stuff that other people have. And I don't like the fact that we're poor. So I sort of stumbled into commercial real estate. I went to UCLA for school. I was going to be an attorney. I graduated, summa cum laude. I studied really hard, was trying really hard, trying to be somebody.
Summa cum laude. Wow, those are
Yes,
some big words I can't even pronounce.
In my fraternity, when I was announced, they kind of announce people and have people stand. So like, okay, so I sat with my fraternity. So magna cum laude, or no, cum laude. Nobody from my fraternity. Magna cum laude. Nobody from my fraternity. Summa cum laude. I stand up like everybody just yeah, all right. But I got into commercial real estate sort of accidentally, where a friend of mine said I could do well and make money doing it. And I didn't really have a plan. I was going to be an attorney. Professor talked me out of it. So now it's like, well, what do I do?
So was your major poli-sci at the time?
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah. Which I will say, people always talk about how they don't like what they went to college for, like, or didn't help them or whatever. I think poli-sci was amazing because it taught me how to communicate, taught me how to write, taught me how to speak. I mean, I was writing 10-page papers 2 a week. Right. So at that level, you learn the essence of communication. So even though it didn't prepare me for law, it prepared me, I think, for business, which I find useful today. So anyway, so I started a commercial real estate firm. They gave me an opportunity. And as I got in, I realized really quickly, wow, this is a cutthroat, take no prisoners, dog eat dog philosophy kind of industry.
You're 22 at the time?
Yeah, ish.
Okay.
And so I'm like, all right, if this is the game, I'm going to play the game. I don't want to be broke like my parents, so might as well just, get cooking on this. And so I became this, I'm sort of a motivated, achieving kind of guy.
I couldn't tell.
Yeah, I know.
No.
I know. It's rare. But I overachieved in being ruthless too. So I became the shark and I was good at it. But I was miserable because I was misaligned with my core values. But I felt trapped because I felt like this is what I saw other people doing to get ahead. And I wanted to get ahead. And then 20 some years ago.
Oh, please.
20 some years ago, I go to a conference and a speaker gets up and starts talking about a different way of doing business, a way of succeeding by helping others. And I was moved and inspired. It's like, is this possible? would this really happen? Is this really true? Is this person really doing this, or is this just the shtick they say to sound cool, right? So went up to him afterwards and I was like, hey, that whole thing about like, that you just talked about, is that, you don't really do that, do you? I mean, that's just kind of a cool. And he's like, no, that's what I do.
You asked him that exact
Question. I was like, it's like, you sound like my dad, like, how is that? How do you make money? And so he kind of walked me through his philosophy, and he basically said, you can't outgive the universe. And the more you help people, the more it comes back, but you got to be willing to play the long game. I said, why have I never heard of this? If this is such a brilliant way to be successful, how come after reading all the success books I could find and all the things and Tony Robbins this and whatever, how come this is the first time I've heard about this? And he said, because it takes too long for most people. And I said, well, how long is too long? Because I want to get ahead, but I also would like to eat today. And he said, it'll take you about 4 to 5 years to reinvent yourself. And I go, wow, that is a long time.
How old are you at the time?
Mid-20s.
Okay.
Yeah, still young in my career.
Yeah.
Maybe mid, maybe 26, 27, somewhere in there. So anyways, so I go, okay, well, I sort of get that. Like, that makes sense. And you help as many people as possible, and you can't outgive the universe. And over time, you build this depth of relationships in the community of people that you've selflessly helped. Now, I didn't have those words. Those are words that I've come up with since, but that was the kind of the thinking. So I got excited. I said, if that guy can do it, I can do it too. And came back all bright-eyed and bushy-tailed and threw my old business plan of cold calling relentlessly away and just started helping just got involved in the community, tried to help as many people as possible, just like he had said.
And where were you getting involved?
In everything that would let me. So nonprofit organizations, business organizations, anywhere where there were people that I wanted to connect with, I would just get involved, volunteer my time, and just try to serve. And I would ask everybody that I bumped into from a business standpoint, I would say, I like to help people. Is there anything I can help you with? And a lot of people look at me like, what do you mean? What can you, like, they thought I was almost trying to sell them. And I said, well, whatever you think you need. And so I ended up making connections for people, right? Helping their kids get jobs, helping them get business.
Was that here in Scottsdale?
All over.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, here in Arizona.
Yeah.
Yep. And so the years ticked by, and just like he said, I always assume that, hey, if it's going to take somebody else 4 to 5 years, it'll take me 1 to 2 years. That was my mindset. It took me 4.5 years. Just like he predicted. And when I got my first big referral, and in the meantime, my wife's like, hey, Jonathan, there's this thing called like money.
I was going to ask you.
It's helpful. It's helpful if we have it versus not have it. And you work really hard. And why do we not have money? Trust me, I'm up to something. I got a game plan here. I promise. And I got my first big referral 4.5 years in. And it was a whale. And I was like, wow, this is amazing. I didn't have to pitch it. I didn't try to sell. It was just like, hey, this guy's helped us with some other things. We really like him and trust him. Can you have him help with this nationwide company's real estate? Yes, I can. And then that just started snowballing. And I got to a point where I realized that what I had stumbled on had the opportunity to transform the industry. I felt like it was a better way of doing business, much more collaborative, much more people helping people versus people being sharks to other people. And so I had another epiphany moment where I was in Sedona looking at the mountains, and I realized that, wow, maybe I could start my own firm. Maybe we could do it just this way. And maybe if I teach other people to do this, maybe it could really have a transformative effect on the world. And I got excited and decided to do it. And, being an entrepreneur is not for the faint of heart, as you know well. And it's been an amazing ride. Ups and downs, trials and tribulations, high times, low times. But it has been quite the journey. And to be here today and to have had the success we've had, and to have people now looking at our message as if it's not crazy. When we first started, people thought our message was nuts. Like, wait a minute, your website is filled with like love and serve, and you're a commercial real estate firm. You're supposed to be a hard. It's like, well, I can be a great negotiator and still have integrity and still help people. So yeah, so it's been an amazing run.
So we've covered a lot there, and I want to get into the specifics. When you were first starting in your career, like a lot of us who are entrepreneurial or very ambitious or motivated, you're going to conquer the world, you're going to make millions, and you're just going to show the world who you are.
Yeah.
And then you get into the real world
Just
out of
watch.
college, and boom, you get slapped in the face. But you still achieve some success. But
Yeah.
you said something that, yeah, you were achieving all of this success financially,
Mhm.
but you weren't connecting with who you were, how you were raised from a core value perspective.
Yeah.
What ultimately, I know you said that you saw this gentleman talking about these things, but can you give us specificity as to what you define being ruthless
Mm.
as, and what were some of the things that you were doing to achieve success,
Yeah.
but you could tell they didn't align with your core values?
Sure. I have lots of examples. So, in advance of giving you a specific example, I'll give you a framework of the types of activities. And they're activities that may not be in the best interest of the client, but are in the best interest of my commission, right? So, typically, if a deal is a longer term deal, you have a bigger commission. If it's a larger square footage, you have a bigger commission.
You're talking about a lease transaction in this scenario?
Lease or purchase.
Okay,
Right.
you go on.
And I represent occupiers or tenants or users of space. So I would be helping them find new office space, find new warehouse space, buy it, build it, lease it, whatever it was. But it was helping the user figure that out. So you're ruthless in the sense that you do whatever it takes to make sure that you maximize your commission and everything else is secondary. So I had a client who was in a fast growing technology company, and I did a lot in the technology, still do to this day. And I still remember, I still feel bad about it. The best thing for her would have been a short-term sublease because they were growing so fast. It was clear she was going to outgrow that. But a short-term sublease didn't make me much money. So I talked her into a 10-year lease, space that's way bigger. I'm like, you can grow into it, way bigger than what she really effectively needed. And I still remember her calling me like upset. I think she might have even been crying, saying like, why'd you talk me into this? Like, this isn't in my, this wasn't a good move for me. And so that kind of stuff really was heavy on my heart. Like on one hand, I was proud of myself for getting a deal done and making it happen and getting paid. But on the other hand, I felt like crap. Right.
Yeah.
And so that's not fun. And then, my parents would be all proud of me. Oh, look at my son. He's successful. But underneath it, I knew that it was a fraud, right? That I was being a jerk, that I was living and behaving in ways that were inconsistent with how my parent raised me. And if they knew what I was actually doing to be successful, they wouldn't have been proud of me. But again, I felt trapped, right? Because I figured they didn't have the right path. They were broke. I didn't want to be broke. Broke sucks. I want to be rich. All these guys are doing the same thing that I just did. So how is it really that, I would justify it to myself all the time.
We all do it.
Right?
We all do it in
like, hey, that's just the business. That's just the way it is.
Yep.
You kind of got to just do it to get ahead. But the reality is I was selling my soul, right? And if anything, my soul was almost like dying inside every time I did something like that. So for me, when I heard that message, it was like, wait a minute. Really? Is this possible? And there was this little flicker of hope, like, wow, man, maybe I don't have to sell my soul. Maybe I can be the guy that my parents raised me to be and be successful at the same time. And so coming full circle, both the book and our business model is exactly that. It's how do we succeed by helping others succeed? Right? How do we I'm very involved in conscious capitalism, and conscious capitalism mantra is business is a force for good, right? So it doesn't say business is a force for good that goes out of business because they're being a force for good. It's like, no, we want to have successful businesses that are a force for good, because if they're not successful, they're not a force for good anymore.
They're gone.
They're gone.
Yeah.
Sort of defeats the purpose.
Yeah.
So, but again, that's all mainstream today, right? Like people are aware of that. We're both nodding. Back when I was doing this, I sounded like a lunatic.
But you know what? It's mainstream, and 99% of it is still just
It's
words.
BS.
It's all garbage.
Yeah.
Why? If it can be so successful the way you've proven it can be,
Yeah.
why do people, I mean, they say one thing
Yeah.
and then you work with them and you
It's very different.
it's a very different. No one likes that.
Yeah.
I don't know anybody that I have met that's being honest that says, "Oh yeah, I like screwing people over just to make more money and I feel really good about it."
Yeah.
But it's so prevalent.
Yeah.
Why?
Well, that's diving deep. I have a few ideas on that. Number one is I think that as a society, we do not have enough examples of people doing it differently.
Mhm.
And if there are examples, selflessness tends to come with another very good trait, but that's also not good for self-promotion, which is humility. So a lot of these people that are doing it the right way are doing it quietly, right? Like, and that's kind of how I was raised anyways. Like, if you do good, don't let your left hand know what your right hand's doing and all that stuff. But I think in a world that's so chaotic and frenzied and cutthroat, you really need to be a poster child of some sort just to give others a path, just a beacon. The way that I looked at it is if I hadn't have gone to that seminar and I hadn't heard that speaker, I never would have even known it was possible. Now, maybe I would have found out a different way or whatever, but I was there in that moment. It had an impact and I changed what I did. And hopefully there's a wave behind me of positivity that I'm able to put into the world instead of all the negativity and the screwing people over that I was doing before. And it's not like I was evil either, right? Like I want to be clear, like I'm not over dramatizing this. It's not like I was like, oh, well, who am I going to screw over today? But because I wouldn't have felt good about that either.
Mhm.
But it was like when the rubber met the road, I looked out for number one. I
Mhm.
looked out for me, right? And to me, an opportunity like that deal that I mentioned was a way for me to get paid. And I had bills and I had a mortgage and I had this and I had a family. So it's so easy, I think, to justify. So that's the first question or first answer. Second answer is, let me clarify. First answer is there's not enough proactive, visible examples out there. Number two is, and this is the hardest part. I talk about this in my book a lot. The main reason why everybody's so full of crap when it comes to this, one, just because it's the messaging of the day. And if you're not saying it, you sound like a shark. So perception is reality at some level. So you got to at least sound like everybody else. But the real reason is that you have to actually change. Right? Like I had to actually transform myself back. Not that I would just say transform myself because I'm not sure that I ever really wasn't a shark growing up. It wasn't even in my psyche. I was just a kid.
Yeah.
So I learned how to be a shark and then I had to go to non-shark. And that is a big shift. You know, I had coaching along the way, read a lot of books. In the moment, like people always say, like, well, it sounds so easy. I'm like, it is, but here's the complexity of it. It's easy the first 22 times that you just go sit down with somebody and figure out ways to help them. The 23rd time, you're like, oh my, how many more of these do I have to do? Like, the ability to maintain and sustain selflessness as a strategy, it requires, I believe, a true heartfelt desire. Like I think you can only fake it for so long.
Yeah.
You can only use it as a manipulative tactic, right? Sort of like, oh, and this is the way I used to be too. In my transformation, I went through all these iteratives of selflessness. Maybe I was better than before, but I still was selfless. And the way that I looked at it in the beginning was kind of like gaming the system. Like, oh, okay. So yeah, so like if I help people, they're going to feel obligated to help me back. Oh, that's cool. If I do that enough, maybe a lot of people.
And you were doing it for the wrong
reasons. The wrong reasons. The motives were wrong,
Yeah.
right? So, and I think the reason it took me so long, and I think today I could replicate it a lot faster. I would be authentic today, as I am. When I want to help somebody, I genuinely try to help them today. Not do the bare minimum, not, sort of keep track and be like, hey, I helped you.
Mhm.
What? That's actually kind of creepy if you think about it. And everybody does it. They're like, oh, they frame it as selflessness. Oh, I'm going to do this thing for you because I just care about you so much. And you're a good guy and I'm a good guy and I just want to help you out. And then there's like this handout, expecting something in return. And then if you don't give it back, you're like, wait a minute, I thought that was a gift. Oh, there's strings attached to that gift. That's not a gift. That's creepy. But that's what everybody does.
It's so exhausting. Why
It's
does
disgusting.
anybody want to live that way?
Because I think that they're trying. I think that it's like,
But it's so much more work. Set aside how crappy you feel
Yeah.
and just how wrong it is.
Yeah.
It's way more work
Yeah.
to constantly get up every morning, scrub your face with a fake facade,
Yeah.
go out into society, present a woo, 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 woo. That's all fake. And most people, if you're authentic, can tell that it's fake.
yes.
But there's so many fakes working with fakes that they all like, oh yeah, let's just promote each other's fake.
Yes.
And you go home at night and you're exhausted and you go to bed and you look at the mirror and you're like, who is this person? I hate this person. You go to sleep and you do it again. It's way more work. So why does it keep happening?
Mm.
I don't get it. Because the financial success that you can get comes faster, because it comes greater. It has confused me for the longest of time.
Yeah.
And I'm not talking about when we're in our youth. When we're in our teens and in our 20s, we don't have a clue about life, period. I'm talking about mature individuals who have gone through life, gone through some personal hardships,
Yeah.
and they're still as fake and inauthentic as the day is long, even into their 30s, 40s, 50s, and that's how they do business.
Yeah.
I don't get it.
Well, it's a good question, and I have a lot of ideas on it. One is, I think that it has never been, until recently, being authentic was never the kind of the mode, right? It was like, if you were a leader, you were not, authenticity was not the words that you used. If you go back to like the Mad Men days, right? Like, it wasn't about being authentic. So there was this sort of, everybody, no matter what it was, they put on this sort of artificial face to do whatever they were doing, right? And that was promoted, and that was sort of like, that's the way you do it. On the other hand, I think, I think people mostly operate from a sense of scarcity and fear, and they don't have the sense of self-confidence to be authentic, right? So for them, it's like, well, I got to go do this. I'm nervous about it. I'm going to put on my best front and go. I got to sound as good as possible because I got these kids I got to feed. And, so I don't have this philosophy that like everybody's bad. And I think everybody's doing their best to the best of their ability. And I certainly wasn't like sitting at home, grabbing voodoo dolls and sticking needles into it and trying to hurt people. It's not like I was.
No,
It's not like I was malicious.
We're not talking about Jeffrey Dahmer type
No.
people. No, we I think we're all in the context we all under. And let me be very clear. I've gone through something similar, and I think anybody who's been in business, you are faced in many circumstances. You know what's right.
Mm-hmm.
You know what's right to do.
Mm-hmm.
But all of these other, what I would say, sinful motivating forces are telling you to do this.
Mm-hmm.
And we're all sinners, and sometimes we do that wrong thing, but we learn from it,
Mm-hmm.
hopefully.
Yeah.
And that's part of the maturation process and realizing. But I'm baffled by how many people, in spite of, and I think you bring up a good point, fear. You hit it on the head. So many people
fear.
live in fear.
Yeah. Well, and I would add one thing to that, which is when you're in a situation where you have the fear prevalent, it almost feels like survival, right? It's not, because you're going to be okay, right?
Mhm.
You're gonna, like, we live in a society where people don't just lay on the street and starve. So you're going to be okay, but it doesn't feel that way, right? And so as a result, everybody's hypervigilant and everybody's trying to figure out, what do I need to do to get ahead and survive? And I would suggest that, going back to my first point, that having people visually, like, out in the public eye and verbally, via communications, living this and teaching. That's the whole reason I wrote the book. I wrote the book to say, hey, man, this was a hard path for me. It took me a lot of bumping this wall and that wall to figure it out. I think I've figured out a formula that worked for me. Not that it's everybody's path, but it worked for me. So let me just give somebody, let me try to put into one book all the things that I learned about how to go from being ruthless to being, not ruthless, and how to really live in business in a cutthroat industry. Because remember, I'm not some talking head sitting on a, I'm not sitting on a mountain somewhere humming, right? Like, I'm in the real world. I'm in arguably the most cutthroat industry out there, and I'm succeeding without being cutthroat. So there's a story there,
Hmm.
and it's not about me, and
Yeah.
it's not even about Kaiser. It's about a philosophy, a way of doing business that I believe is successful. If you look across time, there are so many examples. This is like the best kept secret in the world. It's not like we don't already kind of know it. Like who in your circle, if you went to it and said, "Hey, I think it's a good idea for you to help people," would laugh or say like, "Whatever." Like that's just no. Everybody sort of inherently understands and acknowledges, right? And the phrase "given you shall receive" is it's a very well articulated and often articulated type of statement that we hear all the time. But there's a big difference between getting it psychologically and putting it into play when money's on the line. So I think because of the fear, because of the scarcity mindset that so many people have, even if they're excited about being able as a possibility to live the way that they were trained, they default back to the fear-based mechanism. But if you actually look at successful people over time, and I've done a lot of studying of leaders and looking at, and there are so many examples. There's so many examples
Hmm.
of high caliber individuals that did business the right way, played the long game, right? Didn't just try to maximize their immediate gain. And I believe that's like I say this all the time. Selflessness is the most selfish business strategy out there. People are like, what does that even mean? Well, I believe that the more selfless I am, the more self interested I'm behaving, the more that it helps me in the future. If I really care about long term sustainable success, the more people I help, the more good things I put out into the universe, the more I pay it forward, the more it comes back. I have hundreds of examples of that. Most of our clients are not with us because they heard about our real estate prowess, even though we're really good, but that's not why they're with us. They're with us because they love the fact they can feel that we care and we go above and beyond, and they believe in that philosophy and they want to be partnered with somebody who has that philosophy. Imagine a world, man. Imagine a world where people selflessly helped each other, regardless of personal gain, understanding that it's in their own personal best interest to do so. I want that world for my kids and grandkids so badly.
The thing, I don't know that it's possible in this sinful world, although I think it's powerful. And again, do unto others as you would like done unto you is such a simple and biblical thought,
Very simple.
but we
don't do it.
ever, I shouldn't say ever, it's so much in society. And so, but I think you said something that's really important, Jonathan. You said it's not easy. So I want you to tell us a couple things.
Sure.
When you went down that journey, number one, what was the hardest part? Because you said it yourself. It's easy to do it 22 times, but that 23rd time, you revert back to that old habit and that selfish motivation that you had, and you have to constantly fight it.
Yep.
And number two, talk to us about the most effective ways you found, because I believe we are all inherently selfish, and that's something that we have to guard against and fight against, whether it's fear. I mean, a lot of times it's financial motivation. You're worried about family, all the justifications that we said, to your point, where we don't realize if that's truly what you're most concerned about. Do unto others as you would like done unto you, and you'll have the stars. Talk to us about how you got through that transformation, the struggles, and how you ensured you didn't revert.
Wow, that's that gives me a lot of credit, to be honest. I I would like to say I stumbled like a blind man through a maze, trying to kind of figure it out. And a lot of that stumbling and bumping is what I tried to get people to avoid in my book. Maybe if they read my book, they could streamline it faster. But the hardest part, going back to your first question, the hardest part for me was I was so used to being good at stuff, right? Like I'd always been an overachiever. No matter what I put my heart to, I could accomplish. I mean, I was good at sports. I just was good at everything I tried. And now all of a sudden, I sucked at helping people. I was terrible at it. I was like, how is this hard? I mean, I was like, oh my gosh. Okay, so I go to this meeting. I sit there and listen, and I probe, and I'm present, and I'm asking questions, and I'm trying to identify 3 to 5 things I can do to help this person. That's exhausting. Then I got to go actually do those 3 to 5 things. That's even more exhausting. And meanwhile, I'm making no money doing it, and everybody's calling me crazy. And I'm convinced that somehow, many years from today, this is going to have a big impact on me. I literally would look at the ceiling at night sometimes and be like, am I like all right in the head? Like, am I missing obvious sort of like, JK, I know you're a nice guy, but this is not a good strategy. So it was like, it's the no quit that's the hardest. It's staying the course. As my coach would always say, it's like, that's what integrity is. Integrity is consistency between what you say you're going to do and what you do. So if I say I'm committed to this and I'm not going to give up, by golly, that's what I'm going to do.
So you had someone to hold your feet to the fire.
Sort of. I mean, I had amazing coaches, but it's not like it's not like this was an internal commitment, right? I don't think any external party can really transform somebody. I mean, there were many catalysts. Like I remember sitting in my coach's office and he goes, this is before the transformation. He goes, so, what do you think you need to do to get ahead? And my response was so predictable. So me at the time, whatever it takes. He's like, let me just repeat that back to you. You just said whatever it takes. And in my mind, I'd never really thought through that whatever it takes means whatever it takes. I was just thinking more of like the gumption on it, but I realized, oh my gosh, I really believe to my core that I'm going to do whatever it takes. That doesn't have a lot of boundaries on it. Oh my goodness, is that really me? And then I started looking at myself and I'm like, oh, that's disgusting. That's not who I want to be. So yeah, the hardest part was that. But when you talk about how I actually did it, I mean,
how did you eat? Because that's the reality is you hit it on the head with fear, and usually it stems from financial fear.
Yes, that's the scariest fear for most people.
So what do you do when your philosophy takes 4 to 5 years?
Yeah,
but you do still need to eat.
Yeah, I mean, I went broke. That's the short answer. I went broke, and I didn't have high expenses. Fortunately, borrowed a lot of money, credit cards. I mean, it wasn't a pretty sight. I even went bankrupt in the process. Like it was a long, ridiculously hard road. And it wasn't like, people look at me today and they're like, oh, the overnight success. I'm like, dude, if you had any idea how far from an overnight success I am just an example of someone that I'm a dog with a bone that won't relax his jaw. And that's why I was on this. I felt so good helping people. I can't even tell you how good it felt. And even to this day, and I'll give you little silly examples like that other people can understand that aren't in my world doing this in business. I remember one time, I still think about it. One time I'm just at a gas station, I'm in a hurry, and this like old lady is like, I forgot my wallet at home and I'm out of gas. I took my thing, put it in her gas tank. What it cost me $20? Maybe not even that. I felt amazing. So imagine extrapolating that feeling across all of your interactions. And then imagine that actually helps you put money in the bank. So instead of me having to go scratch and fight and claw my way to the top, as I always thought I had to do, now I can love and serve my way to the top. Whoa. The actions involved in loving and serving are so much different than being ruthless.
Yeah.
Being ruthless is harsh and dirty, and you're looking over your shoulder and it sucks. And no matter how hard your heart is, it's not fun. It might be fun to win. It's always fun to win.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a asterisk next to it. It's like, oh, I had to, it's like the guy who takes performance enhancing drugs and hides it. It's like in his heart, he knows.
Yeah.
Right? It steals some of the joy.
Mhm.
So when you're coming from a place of integrity, when you're coming from a place of service, when you really, I had to go through this transformational process where I went from using it as a tactic to just going, screw it. I'm just going to help. I'm being a fake here. And I was being a fake about being a fake, because here I am walking around talking like I'm the selfless guy. Well, I'm still manipulating. And when I saw that, it was disgusting. And I decided in that moment, I'm not going to be that guy again. And if I'm going to do this, I'm going to do it for real. And I'm going to help everybody just from a place of helping. And that's why I mean, like, it's transformational. It's like, I wasn't just some wake up in the morning and I had an epiphany and now I'm a new guy and wow, look at me, I'm neat. It's the opposite. It's like day after day of like decision making and sometimes making the wrong choices and then getting yourself back on track. But today for me, I'm so trained now that that's the only place I come from. And as a result, I mean, I still have ups and downs like everybody, but not like most people.
Mhm.
Right? Like I absolutely love what I do. I love it. Not because I love commercial real estate negotiations, and I do, but that's a different level of love than what I'm talking about.
Mhm.
The fact that I am surrounded by people that I love and love me back, that know that whatever they need, they can reach out to me, and I know it in reverse. Like it's almost like floating through life. It's like in my opinion, it's what everybody should experience. Like, imagine a world where people selflessly help each other. Imagine the good we can unlock. Imagine the problems we could solve. If and we all know we withhold, right? Like anybody that says no is a liar,
Yes,
right? Like
absolutely
think
true.
about all the good you could just do if you just started helping people more. And if you extrapolate that across a community, across a society, across a world, like, wow, what couldn't we handle? What couldn't we fix? And oh, by the way, if fear is our biggest challenge, imagine how much fear we could reduce by people feeling like other people got their back. I don't run around in any fear. I have legions of amazing friends that got my back, and I have their back. That is extraordinarily peaceful
And rare.
and rare.
Very rare.
So I want to fix it. I want to make it commonplace where I want somebody listening to this, like put this this podcast in a time capsule. And I want somebody in 50 years to open it up and listen to it and be like, these guys are ridiculous. They're talking about obvious stuff. Like, this is the only way. What do you mean? Like, it was different. So my goal is to make it so that I think the greatest business principle of all time is giving you shall receive. I think that it has the greatest opportunity to impact the entire world. Politics, business, families. You go down the list.
Oh, 100%.
There's no category.
The issue is, and you hit it on the head. You went broke
Mhm,
and you had to want it.
mhm,
Number one, internally,
mhm.
not some external force.
Nope.
And number two, you had to hit rock bottom, as our society looks at it,
Mhm,
bankruptcy, and go through before you could rebuild.
mhm.
And, for me personally, I fluttered in the first. You're the walking example of why I started this podcast.
Hmm.
Because
Thank you. That's very kind.
our society shows the glamour
Hmm.
and the glitz.
The glitz.
They skip the rest.
Yeah.
And it's a very lonely path.
Yes.
And no one should have to feel that way,
Agreed.
which is exactly why I started this podcast. And everything you embody and you just said exemplifies that. You hit rock bottom. You saw what was important and what the ruthless side, but also sticking to your principle brings you. You have to face a lot of that fear
Yes. Head on.
And until you do that, and for me, it was also a financial situation, 2 or 3, I just accepted it. I said, you know what? If I go bankrupt,
So be it.
they can't take my faith. They can't take my family. They can't take my friends.
Yep.
And the load that comes off of your back by accepting failure, because all the things you were doing to achieve success were the exact wrong things.
Yes.
Until you've experienced it, I don't think anybody can know without. But my concern is, and I'm an optimistic guy, I look
Mhm.
at society, Jonathan, and we are we are diverging from what you're describing, whether it's politics, whether it's a society as a whole, whether it's I think this stupid thing right here is having multiple impacts negatively
Mm.
on number one, taking the long-term game, because what you just described is a long run game.
Yes, grind.
It's a grind.
Yep.
And this is the exact opposite. And all these generations getting everything so quickly. And
Mm.
now, my generation, we're all getting used to that. And number two, we have more ways to live in a false reality, AI, virtual reality, online, getting lost in a game, which allows us or prevents us from facing our fears head on and becoming better because of it. What is your take on that? And you have kids,
Mhm.
so you know the impact this is having on all of the generations.
Yeah, without a question. And I see it in my workforce too. Um, I have a little bit of a different take. I'm like you. I'm an optimist, and I believe that often it takes, just like I had to break. Often it takes a lot of that in society and business and the world and whatever. It takes that as a necessity to create change, right? So when people say, "Oh, the world's going in a handbasket," it's like, well, that's usually how it works. Usually that's what happens, and then new leaders emerge and new philosophies emerge, right? So I am optimistic in the sense that I think that this philosophy that I'm articulating, despite the fact that there's plenty of people that game the system,
Mhm.
I'm seeing so many more leaders embrace it. And to me, that's really where it starts, because a fish rots from the head, right? So it's got to be a trickle down effect. And organizational cultures are defined by leaders' personal philosophies much of the time.
Mhm.
So if leaders are embracing this and trying, I mean, I'm in YPO and all these different organizations, and they all, I mean, this is the topic du jour. This is and 800 different iterations of it is what we talk about constantly. So this is something that leaders are really learning, and the ones that I believe that the cutthroat leader of the past is already a dinosaur in the near future. So I believe that leaders have to reinvent themselves, or they become less and less relevant and go by the wayside. And so from my perspective, I believe that the world's always had challenges. We just have, we've never been better off as a society ever, yet we feel as a people globally that we're worse off than maybe we've ever been. It's a really weird contradiction. It's like the more stable, the lower the crime rate, the less murders, the all of these, and now all of a sudden we don't have this enemy anymore of there's a fear out there, so I got to be hyper vigilant, and it sort of lulls people to sleep, and they get more and more miserable. So, I mean, I think that there's multiple transformations happening at the same time. I think polarization we're seeing a lot of, but I think that eats itself eventually. And I hope that there's a good solution at the end of that that brings people together. That's not just a big bloody war. Um, and I think that this idea of selflessness as a business strategy, while I was an anomaly 20 years ago talking about it, I'm not an anomaly today. Now, when I go places and talk about it, most people nod like you are, like, yeah, that's what I believe,
But
right?
how do you know their motivations are
I
good?
don't, but at least
That's almost worse. That's a wolf hiding in sheep's clothing.
true. However, I would say that I also would disagree with that for this reason. Change is not instantaneous, and change is hard. And I've been with a lot of people, and I can tell the ones usually that are completely full of crap. But I think that's on the edges. I think that most people truly want to try to learn how to do this. They just don't know how. So when the fear hits, they default, and then we judge them and we say they're this. And so I have a gentleness with humanity because I realize that, dude, we're all just doing our best. Like, there's 1,000 things I can get better at. There's 1,000 things I could improve. But I'm doing my best. So shouldn't I just get a clap on the back and go, "Hey, JK, dude, you're doing pretty good, man. Keep it up." Right? Like, that's what I'm trying to do with people. And so I have a softness for people that are maybe not as far down the path as they could be, or I'd like to see them be, or whatever. But I don't agree that the majority of people are intentionally doing this. I just think they don't see the path very clearly.
I agree with that. I think
their hearts are mostly right.
I think let's go. Who are some examples? You said there's loads of examples through history and even today. Who are some good examples that you would hold out as, this is the Jonathan Kaiser philosophy? This person is practicing everything I've outlined in my book. And because you said we need multiple examples, your number one answer was we need multiple examples.
Yes.
For all generations, and the generations who are coming up will be the next leaders to look to learn how to do this. Who do you see?
Well, I have a bias because he's a personal friend, but John Mackey, who founded Whole Foods, he is, to me, the embodiment of this philosophy. And he's done it at a scale that very few people have. And I mean, fortunately, I've been around a lot of the Container Stores, another one, right? Like there's a bunch of these amazing leaders that I've become friends with through conscious capitalism that all articulate, they may not be saying selfless service as a business strategy, but it's all similar, right? It's business as a force for good. And it's easy to look at someone like John and say, yeah, I wonder what he's like behind the scenes. Like, I've stayed at his house. I know him personally. That dude is the real deal. And he's an inspiration to me because he never lost his way, right? Like, money does weird things to people on both sides. We just talked about the fear side, but then there's also it changes people as people get money. And he never succumbed to that. If anything, he leaned more and more into this philosophy and gave his life really for this concept of conscious capitalism, and still does to this day. So to me, as a young guy coming up, he was somebody that I could, and he went way out of his way to help a guy like me that he didn't need to do anything for me. I still get invites to go to his house every year. It's like, wow, what a neat guy. What a neat guy that isn't full of himself, isn't like, his house is nice, but not over the top in any way, shape, or form. Same with his cabin. Like, rides his electric bike every day. Like, he's just a down-to-earth good dude that cares about people, that wants to see people succeed. Man, if we could have a world of John. And yet he's still hard driving. You don't want to mess with him. Like you don't want to be in the way of his wrath if you piss him off. But he's coming from a place of love, right? Like he loves people, he loves, and he wants to serve. So again, it sounds like I'm giving a love letter to John Mackey, but you asked me the question. So to me, in my life that I've had a personal experience with, he is by far the closest thing to leadership, conscious leadership at scale, proving that it can be effective. And he had lots of haters throughout all of his growth of Whole Foods. Lots of people that, disagreed with his decisions to put people over profits and all of these things. And it paid up for him in the end, right? Like I think 14 billion is what he sold it for. Like, that's not a bad number.
No, it's not. So John Mackey, we're going to have him on the podcast.
He's amazing.
I'm going to need your help.
He's amazing. He doesn't do very many podcasts.
Well, I know with your ability to tell John the good that he can do for conscious capital. See how I did that on recording?
You did that.
I'm going to play devil's advocate with you on John Mackey.
Sure.
Then he sold to Amazon.
Yeah.
Poof.
No, not poof.
Okay.
So
push back.
So Mackey's vision was to help the world become healthier. Mackey's vision was to help stop disease by giving people better, more nutritious food. And he saw Amazon as the fastest way to scale Whole Foods vision. So if you've gone into a Whole Foods, it's still very similar
It is.
to how he left it.
Yeah, it is.
And
I don't know what the culture is like
it-
because I haven't talked to someone that works there, but
it has become the brand of choice for healthy eating. And he saw some things. Him and I have talked about it quite a bit. He saw some things about the innovation side of Amazon that he was very impressed with. And he liked the integration of the cultures. He felt like the two cultures integrated well. Now, again, I mean, it's been a few years now, so I don't know what he would say today. I haven't asked him recently,
yeah,
but I know at the time it was a very intentional decision. It wasn't for the money. He felt like, and the leadership team felt like, it was the best way to realize their vision of helping the world become a healthier place.
you said something, it wasn't for the money.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people who have this philosophy maybe started out believing one thing about money.
Mm-hmm.
And once they achieved it and all of these things, if they weren't in it for the right reasons, their
Mhm.
why wasn't aligned
Mhm.
with their core values,
Mhm.
they quickly changed paths.
Yeah.
And they achieved hundreds of multiples more in money
Yes.
than what they otherwise would have imagined, not by focusing on the money. Why do you think society is so infatuated with money?
Just because it's so essential. Like, having been a kid that doesn't have money sucks.
But does it make you happy?
Well, sitting in a nice cabin staring at the mountains is a lot better than scrapping for food on the street corners. So I think there's a certain amount of basic necessity where money does.
I agree, but when you were scrapping in your early days,
Mm-hmm.
you were making tons of money,
Well,
but you felt
that's a different level of scrapping, though. I mean, what I'm describing is, that's what I mean by the world is at a better place than it ever has been, right? Poverty today is at a much higher level than poverty ever was in the past. People have roofs over their head. They're not starving.
you mean poverty is
Poverty as a definition.
yeah, it's not a reality the way it was.
No,
Like you saw in Papua New Guinea.
There are some places in the world where that still is. So I'm
of
not
course.
speaking like as
yes.
if it doesn't exist anymore.
Correct.
It certainly does.
Yeah.
But I'm saying in generalized industrialized societies, the baseline has risen.
Yes.
Right. And so
no question about that.
So I think that from that perspective, the money, I don't think ever will buy happiness. For me, money buys freedom. It buys security. It buys time, right? If time's our most valuable asset, growing up poor, we never took vacations. Our vacation was like piling in the family car and driving to Yellowstone, and hopefully we got discount tickets to get in, right? I mean, that was what we did. And it's like my dad going, through McDonald's because we weren't going to stop and eat at some nice restaurant. He couldn't afford that. My wife's family, when she grew up, they could never order a soft drink. I was like, $2 for a drink? Are you serious? Right? So I think that for me, I'm in a unique situation because I have become one of the poster boys for success through service, right? So in that 3-word statement, success is the first word, right? So if I wasn't successful financially, I would be a fraud. Mm-hmm. Because the whole point I'm saying is you can do good and do good for yourself at the same time. Let me help you. Let me give you a plan. And I think that's forgotten, right? I think there's this sort of like overly pious, sort of religious-ish argument of like, oh, well, we just do good everywhere and we don't worry about ourselves. I just don't buy that. I think that there has to be a realization that we can't help everybody else and not help ourselves. That's incomplete. And you can't give out of a tank that's empty, right? So the beauty of the strategy that I espouse, and it's not for everyone, And it's not going to work for everybody for a lot of different reasons. But the reason it's worked for me is, I believe, because I'm able to contribute to people's lives in a meaningful way that creates goodwill that then comes back to me somehow. So in the long run, it's good for me, like we've talked about. But again, it's more of a recognition of the fact that this is a truth in the world. Giving you shall receive is a truth. I'm not doing the specific tasks of service that I'm doing with a quid pro quo mindset. I'm not expecting someone to give me something back. That would be creepy, like we talked about before. But I also am doing it with a full recognition that the more I give, the more I get. So it's this really interesting dichotomy where, on one hand, you're saying, well, because I get the question all the time, well, what do you mean be selfless if you're thinking about what's in it for you? Well, to me, how you solve for that is quite simple. Do everything in your power to serve the people that you choose. Oh, by the way, service has to be a choice. There's no compelling me to ever serve anyone ever, because that's no longer service. That's a duty. That's a task. That's a job. That's a requirement.
Great point.
Right? So people go, well, I'll just go broke then. Well, you could, or you could just be strategic with your service. For me, I know who the people I want to connect with. Well, rather than trying to go sell to them, how about I just try to figure out how to help as many of them as possible? Oh, I get it. Right. But again, if you're going through the lens of, I don't care if this person does something back for me or not, but I want to help them. And I'm going to help this person. My experience has been that 70 to 80% of people, 70 to 80% of people that you serve naturally want to try to help you back.
Yeah.
And it creates this really beautiful dance. I love trying to outgive people, right? I don't ever want to be in somebody's debt. I always want to be on the other side of it. Not because I want them to always be in my debt, but just because I want to always be from a place of where I'm trying to outgive others.
Yeah.
It's a mindset, right?
And I think the only barometer, the true barometer, someone asked, well, how do I know if I'm there? You will know whether you are doing something to help someone for the right reasons or for the wrong reasons.
Yeah.
Nobody else might know other than you and God.
But you know.
And
I would say that it's moment to moment, right?
Yeah.
It's not like, oh, okay, now I'm permanently selfless.
Well, of course.
Not how it works.
Yeah, that's not life. There's so much that we can talk about there. And I appreciate you sharing your story with all of the good, the bad, and the ugly, and the success. And I think the thing that you said is, it starts with success through service. So if you had success, but you didn't do it through service, you'd be a fraud. But if you didn't have success and you had service, you
need both.
A fraud as well. You need both. Why do you think this stuns me? This whole concept of let's tax the rich to death. And I'm delving a little bit into politics, which I stay away from, but it's this mindset and how I see society shifting, at least in my viewpoint, and I'm curious to see yours. You said it best. If the company's bankrupt, you can't help anybody. You have to take care of your home first, and then you can give and help other people. What I see, and again, tell me if you see it differently, is there is starting to be, and I don't want to say with the younger generations, I'm not sure from where it stems, but as this concept happens more and more of the younger generations have this, I'm not going to say hatred towards wealth or success or accomplishment, but almost as if it's a red mark in society, and that, we've got to, I'm not going to use the words pay their fair share because I hate that saying, but it's almost as if success is no longer desired or looked upon in a positive affirmation, but the contrary. That person became successful at the advantage of the masses. Do you see it differently, or tell me what your perspective is there?
I don't know if differently, maybe the wrong term. I have a perspective that I think is maybe unique here, which is I see this as a student of history. This is not a new topic, right? This is something that
not at all.
figuring out the balance in society versus of taking care of people versus being able to create your own future, that is the closest thing that's ever come to solving that is the United States, right? And everybody has different variations, and so that's kind of the first point I would make is there's nothing new under the sun, and this is certainly one of them. Number two, I think it's a natural backlash, right? It's a natural backlash from sort of the cutthroat ways that society was. So it's natural to swing back the other direction and overcorrect. I think it'll settle in the middle. I tend to believe that in pretty much every area of my life. I usually say truth is in the middle.
Yeah.
It's usually not at the edges.
Yeah.
And I'm optimistic about people. I think that we are undergoing a societal transformation right now that, transitions are messy. So it feels like we're in a state of upheaval, but that's because we're transitioning. Earthquakes, tectonic plate shifts are highly disruptive.
Mm-hmm.
So when you're going through one, it feels like the world's ending, but the world's not really ending. So we're just new to the game, right? We haven't been around for thousands of years seeing the cycles of everything. I mean, I'm in commercial real estate, right? The cycles are part of the course of every, like, if you assume that this cycle's the end, you don't know enough. You haven't been around long enough. So, what goes comes and what comes goes. And I think that's true for philosophies. I think that's true for ideology. You're seeing this backlash on DEI. Like, it's just always going to be correction over correction.
Mm-hmm.
People are trying to find that balance. When I describe the parties in the US, I'm like, and I'm pretty apolitical. Like I'm in the middle of the road guy. I'm an independent intentionally because I don't want to take a side. I don't like sides. I like everybody. I see truth in almost everybody's arguments. It's just usually incomplete, right? So when I think about what's going on in society, I'm like, okay, in America, we have people that are all about, the red is all about being able to pay your own way, pull your own boots up and make something of yourself, which I'm an example of, right? And then on the blue side, it tends to be, hey, it's not just about the top dogs. Everybody needs to win. It needs to be a collaboration. Like you can't have that without this. And that's just that to me, at the core of the struggle, that's what it is. And I think it's actually beautiful. I think it's beautiful to have the ideology of independence and self-determination and all of that with the heart of we want to help everybody. And does that mean we do all the right things? No. Does that mean we make a lot of mistakes? Yes. But at least you have these forces that I believe help create and shape a more fair and meaningful society for everyone.
What concerns me is the level of unwavering philosophical divide.
It's not new. This was the way it was back in the Revolutionary period.
I understand that. And look what happened. Britain was no longer the empire. They were gone. And Ecclesiastes 1:9, there's nothing new under the sun. You're exactly right. But that doesn't mean with the United States is left standing at the top.
I mean, who says the United States has a stand at the top?
I'm not saying that. I'm simply saying, but that's
I don't know. I don't know what's coming. I just believe that society today is undergoing a shift, and how that shift ends, who knows?
Who knows? You said you've been incredibly gracious with your time. So a few more questions. Let's get into the meat and potatoes of commercial real estate.
Okay.
We started the podcast talking about it's a very interesting time in commercial real estate.
Mm-hmm.
I ask every single broker that I know, okay, tell me your perspective. What are you seeing in the commercial real estate given how quickly rates have raised? Do you think we're at the bottom? Obviously, nobody has a master globe. Give us your perspective on...
Well, it depends on product type.
Okay.
Right? So, and it depends on geography. So I'll give an Arizona-centric answer for brevity purposes.
Perfect.
Office space is challenged, as everybody already knows. As people have gone to more of a hybrid model, they have cut space dramatically. That said, a lot of companies are going, I might have overcut, and so they're releasing. What you're really seeing in office is the higher-end product, the nice stuff. People are that stuff's going through the the roof on rates, on demand, because so many companies are going, hey, if I'm going to get people back to the office, I want a really nice space in a cool area that makes people want you, the carrot versus the stick. And some of the older product that has maybe lower ceilings, smaller windows, smaller floor plans, a lot of that is really struggling. And you're going to see a lot of those are going to be going back to the bank. There's a lot of money on the sidelines waiting to swoop in and snatch it at discounts, right? That's on the office side. On the warehouse side or industrial side, Arizona has seen record deliveries of new space. And that has caused a very, very tight, under 2% vacant type scenario to really get a little bit more normalized. It's still landlord centric, but as more and more this space hits, it becomes more and more of a normalized market where tenants have options instead of feeling trapped in space. On the retail side, it's sort of similar to office, as the good product is excelling and the crappy product is going away or struggling. There'll always be a place for kind of low to mid-end retail. It's just not, there's warning flags there. On the multifamily side, multifamily is doing pretty well, but there's warning flags as well, because of affordability primarily. And then on the healthcare space, medical space, that really has done well. Continues to be a good investment for investors there. I do a lot of work in the healthcare space, and the demand is only continuing to increase. People still get sick. And now we're seeing this huge influx and increase in behavioral health challenges. Right. And so that's unfortunate, but that's another element that we have to take in consideration.
Industrial. I have heard that it was tight, and now we have something like, the numbers better than I do, 1 million square feet of industrial coming on in the next 2 to 5 years.
A lot more than that.
How much is it?
Well, we've had 30 million come on board so far.
Okay.
Right. Which is
in the last how long?
Nah, I don't have the exact, but call it the last 6 to 9 months. And you have 50 million in the pipeline. So we have massive, massive numbers of space. Now, if you dissect that, there's part of it is Arizona has hit its stride. So we have semiconductor companies that are flocking here in droves. And the supply chain around that, I say that the biggest recruit Arizona's ever gotten outside of Intel, because that was a pretty big deal, is TSMC. And because of TSMC and Intel, I'm going to be with the president and the mayor and the governor tomorrow, unveiling, chips money at Intel.
TSMC is a chip manufacturer that's building a ginormous plant off the I-17 here in Arizona. For those listeners who aren't in,
it's having a big effect. So anyway, that's another reason why Arizona's got the demand that it has.
For 1 minute, take a larger scope. Talk about it more broadly speaking in the United States. What are you seeing?
I mean, some of the markets where the commute is brutal, some of the big downtowns have really struggled, but New York is back. San Francisco's coming back.
Really?
Chicago's coming back. So we'll see. I mean, there's still buildings that are going to go under. There's still buildings that are going to try to be converted to something else like multifamily, although only 15% of buildings can be converted to multifamily, their office. But so there's plenty of pain to come, but I think people are starting to, a recent article just came out that said startups that are in office versus remote get 4.5x valuations. It's like, wow. So that kind of, the more and more people are realizing the value of being together. I do think the ship has sailed on 8 to 5, Monday to Friday. I don't think that ever comes back, but I think the idea of getting people in the office a few days a week is going to become the norm. And you have to have space for them. Even if they're only there 3 days a week, you have the same amount of space that you would have for them if they were in there 5 days a week.
How are these places coming back with rates at historically modern times, high levels?
Well, again, it's about, if you're a company and you're in 50,000 feet and you say, hey, we're going to go more hybrid, we only need 25, and we're going to go upgrade our space significantly. So that's one way. But I think, existing product, because the cost of construction has gone up so much, just the cost to get a tenant into a space is so much higher. Cost of land has spiked. I mean, all the costs have just gone up. And so if you have existing product that was built out pre-pandemic, you can still, I mean, you have a competitive advantage, just like if you built a house before then. Today, to replace that house is probably 2x. Um, so I think that there's going to be a settling right now. The gap, I was just giving a presentation earlier and we were talking about the gap between the high-end product in office and the low-end product in office. And it's significant. It used to be a lot closer, more tight. Now it's pretty significant.
You're talking about what it's leased out at.
Yeah, the like marketing asking rates, the difference between like $60 and $20, right? That's pretty significant when you're talking about office.
Last economic question for you, Jonathan. Do you believe that this model we currently live in is sustainable without having a recession?
I think we've been having a slow recession for a while.
But we haven't felt any pain. We haven't felt any meaningful pain, at least not what I see.
I mean, I have plenty of clients that have felt pain. But I get your point. I mean, it hasn't been a bloodbath. I think everybody that went through the last Great Recession, me included, sort of has this worst case scenario in mind, like that needs that. I've been surprised at how resilient the U.S. economy is. I think a lot of the onshoring, despite all the negatives around the supply chain disruptions through COVID and the geopolitical tensions and the realignment of supply chains, and despite all of that, what it's done for the U.S. is a manufacturing boom, a renaissance, so to speak, of it. And Arizona's the number one, right? There's an article today. Arizona is number one on that end. And so, it's booming for Mexico. I do a lot of work in Mexico. Mexico can't keep up. They have 10x the volume than they can even handle right now from every kind of company from around the world that all wants to access the U.S. through a friendly nation that's in close proximity. So, I'm very bullish about the U.S. I don't think that we need to be. I don't think success is success and failure is neatly defined in boxes. I don't think the US has to be like they were for the last 50 years to still be wildly successful. In fact, maybe some of the taking of the load of trying to help oversee the world, maybe if other people can step up and contribute, that would be helpful. I don't know.
Yeah.
Right? Like I'm not a political person, but I refuse to believe that change inherently is destructive.
Yeah.
I mean, it's destructive in the sense that you have to break something to fix it, but that doesn't mean that was a bad thing to break, right? Or like when you work out with weights, like you're sore, you're actually tearing your muscles. So you could look at that and go, oh my gosh, I tore my muscle. That's a bad thing. Well, not really, because you're building your muscle through it. So how the world continues, obviously there's a ton of scary stuff out there. And if I got absorbed in that every day, I'd probably be depressed. But it's like I choose not to think about that, and I just focus on the good that I see and trying to pay it forward. And at least for me, that seems to work.
Is there anything we haven't covered that you would like to cover, you think would be particularly useful for our listeners?
Well, you've been pretty good with your questions.
Thank you.
Let's see.
What would you said you're 49.
Clinging to my 40s. Clinging to my 40s.
Just remember, with age comes wisdom.
It's going to feel weird to say I'm 50.
When do you turn 50? This year?
This year. Yeah.
What would you tell your, not 26-year-old self, because we already knew where you were at 26, but your 32-year-old self after your transformation, but even through normal life maturing?
Yeah.
What would you tell yourself if you could?
Honestly,
yeah,
because I had a lot of stress, I would say everything's going to be okay. Just don't give up. Everything's going to be okay. Like I used to have a lot of scarcity mindset myself. So to have an older self that's successful, come back in time and go, dude, just keep up the good work. But the only problem with that is I fear it might demotivate me, because there's something about scratching and clawing to get out of poverty that there's a driver. You're willing to go work harder. You're willing to, it's something I think about with my kids. Is like, how do I instill in them the same values? You can't unless you've had, I mean, I was I was cutting lawns,
Yes.
going door to door at 13, knocking on random people's doors. Can I cut your negotiating with them? Like, I did that out of necessity. My kids don't have any of that necessity. Necessity is, Dad, can you give me $50? I need to go do this.
Exactly. You have just opened a whole nother podcast.
We don't have time for that
Yeah,
one.
we don't have time for that. Jonathan Kaiser, the founder and managing partner of Kaiser Commercial Real Estate and the author of You Don't Have to Be Ruthless to Win. Again, I will have a link so you can buy his book on Amazon in the show notes. Support Jonathan that way, and you'll be supporting the podcast at the same time. Jonathan, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me,
It's
good
been
sir.
fantastic.
Thank you for listening to the Andrew Holland Podcast. Never miss an episode by subscribing to and liking our YouTube channel, The Andrew Holland Podcast, and by following and liking the show on your favorite audio platforms. Be sure to connect with us on X, formerly Twitter, A Holland Podcast. That's A Holland Podcast, so you can interact with Andrew, the team, and our guests throughout the week. Thank you again so much for listening. Have a great day, and we'll talk again soon.